Open your eyes to the light. It has begun. Don't stop it now. Don't let them stop it.
I'll be with you. I won't leave.
You are my witness.
And that's a clip from Mary Magdalene. I'm delighted to say Rooney Mara, the star of the film, is with us. Hello, Rooney. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
So I enjoyed Mary Magdalene very much and knew nothing about it at all. I always think it's the best way to go and see movies. Just I know roughly what the story was,
Yeah.
and I knew that you were in it. I know that Joaquin Phoenix plays Jesus, but anyway, that's all I knew. Just tell us how you got involved in this film in the first place.
Well, I had worked with Garth Davis on his first film, Lion.
That's right. And that went pretty well.
Yeah, and I just enjoyed working with him so much. I don't know if you've met him, but he's just he's a very, very special human and director. And I had really wanted to work with him again. And I think it was a few months after Lion, he sent me an email asking me what I thought of Mary Magdalene. And I kind of knew what he meant from that. And I at first, to be honest, was like, oh, God, don't, like, please don't. Because I knew I really wanted to work with him, but I was not really that interested in making a religious film, film about a religious figure. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. And so he sent it and I read it. And I was pretty shocked after I'd read it because I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. So I thought I knew my stuff. And I was shocked at how little I really knew about her. And so then Garth flew out and we met and talked about it. And yeah.
What did you think it was going to be about?
Well, I grew up, hearing about Mary as the, the prostitute that Jesus sort of saves and then she joins them. But I had no idea that she was sort of this incredible spiritual leader in her own right. She's an incredible feminist figure, and what she did was incredibly brave. And yeah, I didn't know anything about her except that she was the whore, essentially.
Well, I suppose at this point of the interview, people were thinking, well, actually, that's all I know about Mary Magdalene as well. So why don't you introduce us to the Mary that you play in this film? Because you've already mentioned a number of intriguing aspects about the way you play her. Just explain who she is in this particular story.
Well, we meet her and she's living in Magdala with her family. She's the daughter of a fisherman and she has, just a simple life living with her family. Her family's trying to marry her off. She's sort of like past the age of when you're supposed to be married during that time. But she's not really interested in having that kind of life. She's sort of unusual. She sort of doesn't really fit in with her family. She's very much aware of her faith and her belief in God, and she wants to follow that. But, during that time, it was uncommon for a woman to be able to do that. That was sort of reserved for the men. And then Jesus comes along and is sort of the first person in her life to really see her and validate these feelings that she's having, and it gives her the strength to follow him. So she leaves behind her family, everything she knows and loves behind, and it's very brave. I mean, to go off with this huge gaggle of men, be the only woman amongst them, and from there, she becomes a very important figure in his movement.
In your movie, is she basically a disciple? So there are disciples in the names that we pick up. So there's Peter and there's Judas and there's Philip and so on. And essentially,
Yeah.
That's what you are.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was in 2016, maybe, that the church they declared her to be one of the disciples. So she was, at least it's my belief, that she was one of his disciples. And it was just incredible to me. She was also a very important disciple. She was there. She was witness to his death. She was the witness for his resurrection. She was a very, very important figure in the story. And yet she is known to be just as a whore. And all of these other men have churches all around the world built in their name and are considered saints, and people pray to them. And
see, those two aspects of the story don't really go together, do they? Because you're saying that she's this important disciple who was there the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection. None of the other disciples, I think, are mentioned of doing all those three.
Yep.
And yet she's the one that's been denigrated over the years. Something's got adrift somewhere.
Yeah.
So she is chosen as the first witness. And actually, one of the intriguing things about the story is that it feels very radical the way you're telling this story. because we're familiar with a lot of the aspects of the story, but also then the way it's told and its focus on Mary feels very different. And yet it's quite traditional in as much as the Jesus, as played by Joaquin Phoenix, he heals people. You know, he raises people from the dead. He's crucified and there's a resurrection. So on that side, I'm kind of thinking, are you nervous about the response to this film, or who's going to love it or who's going to hate it? I don't know.
Not really. I think the film has the potential to reach so many different people who have faith, people who are atheists, people who are just spiritual. You know, I think Garth made a film that feels much more relatable and human than maybe any of the other biblical films we've seen. So I think it has the potential to reach many more people.
So does this all go back to your relationship with Garth then, really? And because you had such a good time with Lion, did he say to you why he wanted to make this film? I was just struck by your reaction when you're going, oh, I want to work with you again. I don't want to do this. I want to do a religious film.
Well, I didn't want to make a religious film, and I was very clear about that. And he's like, I'm not going to make a religious film. I'm going to make a spiritual film. And I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not religious at all. And he's not religious at all, but he's definitely probably the most spiritual human I've ever met. And he's just really, he's just tapped into something that I'm not quite tapped into, and I'd like to be, but he just has this quality about him. And I don't know, I just really trusted, I trusted that the material in his hands could be something really special. And I thought it was a really important feminist story that needed to be told. And I knew that he was the right person to tell it.
At some stage, you must have said to him, well, who's Jesus then?
That was one of my first questions. Yeah, it was pretty early on. I mean, I think he had Joaquin in his mind from the get-go. And as soon as he said that, there wasn't really anyone else you could imagine playing the part.
For people who haven't seen it yet, how would you describe what Joaquin does to that role?
Well, I haven't seen it, so I can only...
You haven't seen the film?
I haven't seen it yet, no, but I can speak from,
Because
I was there.
You were a witness.
Yeah, exactly. I was witness to it. I mean, Joaquin is one of the most gifted actors, definitely the most gifted actor I've ever worked with, one of the most gifted actors we have working today. He brings a humanity to it that is, I don't know, I don't think we've ever seen Jesus played like that before. But at the same time, there is something about him that feels divine, but he's very human, very much human.
I just wonder if his reaction was similar to yours. He gets an email from Garth and he said, well, I'd like to work with you. And he says, that's great. I want you to play Jesus. Oh, really?
No, he always jokes that he was like, yeah, finally someone gets me. I mean, that is really daunting. I don't know if I would have been brave enough to play Jesus if I were. You must have had conversations along the lines of, are we really doing this story? Definitely. I mean, listen, I that was one of the things early on. I was like, am I really going to be in scenes with Jesus? Like, how am I supposed to do a scene with Jesus? Because on the one hand, it's just another role. It is an acting role. You have parts to learn. You have to, and it's very emotional. It's very powerful. But on the other hand, you're playing roles which have been known for thousands of years and which are very special to lots of people, and they will feel annoyed if they don't like it. Yeah, exactly. And it's also, it's hard as an actor to play something that doesn't feel fresh. I mean, how many times have we seen the crucifixion scene? So, yeah, before, once we got into it, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt very new, like we hadn't seen it before. But it was definitely daunting going into it, knowing how many times people had seen that played out before. Mm. Can I ask you the casting question? Because it's a very mixed cast that we have playing this film. I guess unless 100% of the cast come from Israel-Palestine, people are going to say, this isn't racially appropriate. What is your take on the mix of cast that we have for Mary Magdalene? I think Garth did a great job bringing in sort of a whole gaggle of people from different places. I can understand why maybe some people would be disappointed at what you said, that not everyone is from a certain region. It was definitely something I sort of struggled with before I took on the part and questioned. And, I just had to sort of trust Garth. It really all just came down to that. I trusted that his intentions were good and that he was going to make something that was integral. And I just kind of had to follow him. Yes. In Garth we trust. In Garth we trust. Basically. As you said you haven't seen the film, so I can
It is worth mentioning, I think, that we should definitely say this is the last film which has been scored by Johan Johansson,
Yeah.
who passed away recently. So you won't have, I imagine you won't have seen his music
No, not
work with the
yet.
score.
But I hear it's beautiful.
It
and
is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But the cast must have been pretty stunned when you heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
passed.
terrible tragedy, and it's yeah. I'm really very much looking forward to seeing the film now, just for that reason.
Seems strange. I've seen your film and you haven't seen it. Some listeners' questions. Nicola Millard to Rooney Mara. The pie eating scene in A Ghost Story is one of the weirdest but most profoundly moving scenes I've seen on screen in a long time. What was your reaction when David Lowery pitched it to you, and do you actually like pie?
Well, he didn't pitch it to me. It was in the treatment that he had sent when he sent the Ghost Story, and it was actually the scene in the treatment that made me want to do the film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was profoundly moving. It was I had never seen anything like that before, and it felt like such an amazing way to show grief. And so that was really the thing that made me want to do the film. I don't like pie. No.
Any pie? Vegan pie?
No, I'm not a pie fan.
Okay.
Certainly not anymore.
Jamie Dayborn, you've worked with many talented directors such as David Fincher, Garth Davis, David Lowery. Do you have plans to direct yourself?
I don't think so. Maybe.
Produce, maybe?
Yeah, definitely that. Maybe many years from now.
But at the moment, just happy doing the acting.
Yeah, I still have a lot to learn with acting.
And what's coming next for you?
Nothing. I don't have. I haven't worked since Mary. Really, I did a small part in Gus Van Sant's film "Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot," which is coming out soon. But other than that, I don't have anything.
I'm sure it won't be long before the next project. Or another email from a director, and you have to say, "Oh, really?" Rooney Mara, pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.